Hi, this is Jen Rubin, and this is Jen Rubin's Green Room. A very happy and sweet new year to all of my Jewish listeners and watchers. I hope your holiday has been a memorable one. Uh, Yesterday was an extraordinary day, not only because it was Rosh Hashanah, but because Liz Cheney and Kamala Harris appeared together in Rubin, Wisconsin, which is the birthplace of the Republican Party. Liz Cheney gave a wonderful speech about democracy, about proudly endorsing Kamala Harris, about the essential qualities we need in a president, someone who's going to protect and defend the Constitution, someone who's going to respect the rule of law, and who's going to be a champion of our values overseas. Kamala Harris then gave an extraordinary speech herself. And I think the entire episode illustrated a few things. First of all, it's very common for Republicans, those few brave souls who have endorsed Kamala Harris, to say something like, we don't agree on everything, or we don't agree on anything, or we agree on virtually nothing. It's actually not true. They actually agree on quite a bit. And I don't think it's necessarily helpful to say the only thing they agree on is democracy. And that's because Republicans tend to paint, the MAGA Republicans tend to paint Democrats as extreme, as wigged out. And in fact, those pro Harris Republicans and Harris agree on many policy positions, and it's the MAGA Republicans who are off in outer space. Let me give you just two. Liz Cheney indicated that one of her principles as a conservative was support for the free market, that private industry is the engine of growth. Kamala Harris has said almost exactly the same thing in her economic speeches. She wants to work with the private sector. Now, don't get me wrong, they're going to have very different policy prescriptions. Liz Cheney, no doubt, doesn't want to move up the corporate tax rate. Kamala Harris does. But they both agree on capitalism. And they both agree that you have to have fair rules of the road in trade. And they both oppose, for example, Trump's loony tariff provision. So it wouldn't hurt for Republicans to point out sometimes that there are major areas of agreement. And the big one for Liz Cheney is, of course, Ukraine. Kamala Harris has been stalwart in her support of Ukraine. She said it. She said that it is in America's interest. She said she will always stand with Ukraine. She pointed out in Wisconsin that the position that we're going to give things to Russia is the same position that Russia has. That's Trump and Putin are on the same side here. And that it is in our interest to stand with our Democratic allies. That portion of the speech could have been given by Liz Cheney, and I'm sure it was at some point or another, or words pretty similar to that. So again, Republicans who are endorsing Kamala Harris agree on democracy, but they also agree on some big major stuff, like we shouldn't wreck the international economy with across the board tariffs, like we should stand on the side of Ukraine, not on the side of Vladimir Putin. So, yes, there are many policy differences at a moderate and at a micro level, but we also shouldn't exaggerate the differences on basic principles. And that's important for the following reason. It's going to be important to maintain a coalition of the governing and the governable. In other words, when we did things like the infrastructure bill, we got Republicans who were interested in good government to join hands with Democrats. We're going to need to do that in the future. And it's important to point out to people that the sane people do agree on some really important policy issues. So I'm not thrilled about this line that we don't agree on everything. Listen, I get why they're saying it. They don't want Republicans who are voting for Kamala Harris to feel like they have to give up their positions on everything, to feel like they have to declare themselves to be progressive Democrats. But they could say something like, you probably don't agree with Kamala Harris on much, but you'd be surprised. And here are a few of the things you probably do agree with her on. I don't think it would hurt to say that. And I think it's going to be important, if God willing she wins, to maintain that there are differences. It's the Republicans in the Trump camp who are Looney Tunes. I don't think Liz Cheney favors rounding up 11 million people, putting them in camps and deporting them. I'm sure she does not. She doesn't support using American troops to suppress dissent. So again, it's really important to make sure that the country understands it's not that Democrats are off in left field and Republicans are doing us a favor simply because of democracy. It's that they actually have more in common with her than they do with Donald Trump, because Donald Trump is not a conservative. He's a whacked out, racist, authoritarian reactionary. So let's not overdo the dissimilarities between the Republicans and Kamala Harris. So what else is going on in our political news? Well, keep an eye on the House seats, because yes, the presidential race drives the House seats in many cases, but the House races are also reflecting something that's going on around the country. And I think that's a gradual tilt to Kamala Harris. You know the line from Hemingway, how did you go broke? Slowly at first and then all at once. Well, elections can kind of be that way too. Slowly, and then kind of the ceiling caves in. Now, I'm not predicting a landslide, but I'll have you note that there were about 5 seats that Cook Political, which gets down into the really nitty-gritty of individual House seats, shifted in the direction of Democrats. Some of them went to toss-up, to lean Democrat. Others went to surefire Democrat, to surefire Republican, rather, to toss-up. And they even moved the Ted Cruz race from likely Republican to lean Republican, meaning it's winnable. That's right. Texas is winnable. And as AOC said the other day, if Democrats break through in Texas at any level, at the Senate level, at the presidential level, American politics will change for a generation, because the Republican Party is nowhere without Texas. So I would keep an eye on some of those House races. I would keep an eye on those Senate races. We have 3 now highly competitive surprise Senate races. That's Florida, Texas, and Nebraska. So keep an eye on all those. Something is going on. It's not simply that this is a neck and neck race. It is that I think there is something in politics called momentum, and it's going in the direction of Kamala Harris and the Democrats. The other interesting development, of course, it's not really new if you've been paying attention to the actual numbers, but the economy is really, really strong. We just had an out of the park, blow your socks off jobs report. 254,000 new jobs. It was supposed to be like 150,000. The unemployment rate is down to 4.1. This is an economy that is firing on all cylinders. GDP is much higher than Republicans thought it was going to be, and even many Democrats thought it was going to be. We are headed for that proverbial soft landing. The Fed is cutting interest rates. Inflation is coming down. The job market is strong. Consumer sentiment is high. And that's why Trump is doing what he always does when good news happens, and that is he lies. He lies even more than he usually does. He talks about eating cats and dogs. He talks about the federal government giving FEMA aid to illegal immigrants, which is nonsense. He comes up with wild lies, and Vance does the same. It's not because they necessarily think you're going to believe them. It's because they want you to believe in nothing. They want you to believe that, well, Vance says this, Waltz says that, Harris says this, Trump says that. That's not true. That is not the case. There is no factual equivalence. Yes, sometimes Harris and Waltz misspeak or they exaggerate. They are politicians, but they don't make up bald-faced lies out of thin air. Vance went through that debate and said that Donald Trump tried to save the Affordable Care Act? That's preposterous. Vance said, I never wanted to ban abortion nationwide. Yes, he did. These are ridiculous lies that stem from this desire that authoritarians have to convince you that there is no such thing as objective reality. You can't believe anyone. You can't believe the institutions. You can't believe the job numbers. You can't believe this. You can't believe that. The only one you can believe is Donald Trump. And it gets to this ridiculous cult-like state where no amount of data, no amount of information is ever going to convince these people of anything. Well, some things are a matter of opinion, and some things are a matter of fact. Donald Trump has tried to get rid of the Affordable Care Act since he came down that escalator in 2015. So let's not confuse differences of policy or interpretation with just sheer, ridiculous, unblemished lying. And that's what he and Vance do. And it's scary in a sense that they do it so easily, so reflexively, so often. But remember, there's a psychotic quality to Donald Trump, and he bends other people to his will so that they lie along with him. Now, there was one more development this week that was really delicious, and that was the release of this very, very big brief by Jack Smith, the special counsel, in the January 6th case. Now, some commentators, like Ellie Honing, who I think has lost his mind, say, oh, this was a setup. Look at the timing. It's so political. You know why they released it now? Because the United States Supreme Court screwed around with this case, delayed and delayed, then delayed another 30 days after they had issued the warning. And it has only now gotten down to the district court, who has handed this ridiculous opinion that now requires a factual analysis of each and every action to determine whether, in the Supreme Court's view, Donald Trump is immune or not. So if you want to blame someone for the timing and for the need to lay out all of this evidence, go talk to the Supreme Court and the right-wingers on the Supreme Court. Those are the people who wound up setting up Donald Trump. Inadvertently, of course, but that's what we have. And what do we have? We had an enormous document, almost 200 pages of facts, one after another, and it all comes from Republicans. It all comes from Republicans in his immediate circle, and it makes clear several things. One, he absolutely knew he had not won the election. Well before the votes were in, he was planning to claim fraud. He was told he didn't win the election. He insisted on it. When he was told certain votes favored Biden, he said, the facts don't matter. Just give me something to work with. This is just complete, premeditated, willful misstatement, lying, fraud. It's not like he was so nuts he actually thought he won. Well, maybe now he's talked himself into it. But at the time, he knew he was making stuff up. And the numbers moved all over the place. Oh, we won by 50,000. We won by 30,000. We won by 150,000. So the facts are damning as to his intent, that he knew he was stealing the election. By the way, even if he thought he had won, it didn't excuse the conduct. He still acted in illegal fashion. But let's get over this notion that he actually thought he won. The other thing that is so interesting is just his willful indifference to the life of Mike Pence. Told he had to be moved to a location that he'd just been rescued from the Capitol, where he was under attack because the mob had been incited by Donald Trump. Trump was told about his evacuation, about Pence's evacuation, and he said, so what? That is a typical pathological narcissist who doesn't care at all about other people. He has no shame. He has no empathy. All he wants is what he wants, and anyone in his way has to be destroyed or bent to his will. So some of the little tidbits that we're getting, while not complete revelations, are so telling and are so Donald Trumpian that you really cannot dispute what is being said. Now, it is also interesting that although the witnesses have been mildly disguised with P1 and P53 and all kinds of other numbers, we know that Mike Pence talked directly to the grand jury. We know that Mark Meadows talked to the grand jury. We know that the White House counsel talked to the grand jury. All those people who would not cooperate with the January 6th committee, they talked. They talked under oath. And those are the people who, if Donald Trump does not win this election, will be the ones testifying at trial. And that's why Donald Trump is particularly wigged out this week, because not only does he see the election slipping away, but he's getting a good sense of what Jack Smith has on him, and the very real possibility that he's going to spend a considerable amount of time in jail, unless he flees the country, has really begun to dawn on him. And as I've said many times, I'm not being facetious. I wouldn't care in the least if he fled the country, went to Venezuela, went to Russia, and just went away. He has been a cancer on the American polity. He has been a grotesque example for Americans. He has unleashed the worst in Americans, whether it's lying, whether it's xenophobia, whether it's misogyny. And we would be benefited if he not only lost decisively, but he fled like the coward that he is. And then we can begin the job of repairing the nation. And we will have our work cut out for us. So the election is going in the right direction. Don't let up. If early voting has come to you, make sure you vote early. It makes a difference. Not only will you bank your vote so that if something arises on election day, you will not have missed the chance to vote, but by voting, you take yourself off the list of names that the Democratic ticket and the Democratic Party has to hound to get out. You're helping the people who are getting out the vote. They don't have to worry about you. You've already voted. So if early voting has begun in your state, make sure you get it done either by mail or in person, because we have not only a presidential election, but a Senate and a House to win. So if you enjoy this program, you can subscribe. Click right there. Tell your friends and family. They can follow us wherever they get their podcasts. Bye-bye.